Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of War Talk. Stefan here, coming to you from the General Warfare Camp, and in today's video, we're going to be going over all the new Kaldheim commanders. And before we start with that, I have a special clip to show you guys.
I think the plane I would choose, I think this could happen, if it's possible, because they've done it with Theros and they've done it with Amonkhet. But I would go back to the use of the gods, but with the Nordic mythology, like seeing like Thor and like Odin, Loki, and like Hel and all those kind of gods, especially somehow factoring in Nidhogg or like Ragnarok in some way, even if Nidhogg is in the form of Nicol Bolas.
Yeah, that was a clip from almost 2 years ago, going over what kind of sets we want to see in the future. You could kind of say I kind of called it. And as you can tell, Kaldheim was a set I've been looking forward to seeing since Amonkhet, especially with both the Greek and Egyptian gods being represented in magic form. It just made sense for it to eventually have the Norse gods be involved in the magic mythology, as it were. And personally, I'm a big fan of Norse mythology for as long as I can remember. So hearing about the set and seeing the spoilers roll out each and every day just got me even more excited to see the set come out and see the full spoiler list. This is most likely going to be a longer form video, so I'm going to leave some timestamps in the description down below, just so you don't get bored the entire way through. And if you want to see specific commanders that I talk about in this video, you're more than welcome to do so. With that out of the way, we have 33 commanders to go through, and 11 of them are the god cards, and we're going to be going over both the gods and their modal DFC counterparts. And so, let's get started with Magda, Brazen Outlaw. It is a 2/1 for 1 and a red, legendary dwarf berserker that has other dwarves you control get +1/+0. Whenever a dwarf you control becomes tapped, create a treasure token and sacrifice 5 treasures. Search your library for an artifact or dragon card, put that card into the battlefield, then shuffle your library. This is a very eccentric and versatile commander, allowing you to create treasure tokens and tutor on the same card. What also is really good about this card, apart from the Lord ability that it has, is that the treasure ability is not limited to attacking. And you can use vehicles for their crew abilities and cards like Cryptic Gateway to get more dwarves and treasures on the field, or Chiron Negotiations to ping other opponents. As far as a competitive commander, I'm not super sure they can stand their ground in the meta, but in casual and budget, this is a really fun commander to build around. The next card we'll be going over is Toski, Bearer of Secrets. So Toski is a 1/1 for 3 and a green legendary squirrel that has this spell can't be countered. Indestructible, Toski, Bearer of Secrets attacks each combat if able, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So to my knowledge, Toski is based on Ratatoskr, the squirrel that runs up and down the world tree to deliver messages to the world tree from the eagle's perch atop. As a commander, Toski seems like a Voltron commander, since it already can't be countered and has a keyword that is hard to keep on a commander. With extra card draw on a commander, you can easily go Voltron and suit Toski up with equipments and auras that make him even harder to get rid of. I just wish, personally, that he was 1 mana cheaper and he'd be super scary as a commander. So, the next card we're going to be getting to is the first of our gods. It's Esika, God of the Tree, and its modal is the Prismatic Bridge. So, Esika is a 1/4 for 1 green, and it's a legendary god, the first god that we'll be going through in this video. It has Vigilance, tap and add 1 mana of any color, and other legendary creatures you control have Vigilance and tap, add 1 mana of any color. And the Prismatic Bridge is a 5 color, so Wooburg, white, blue, black, red, and green, for a legendary enchantment that has, at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card or planeswalker card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So I'm not completely sure lore-wise who Esika is based off, yet my guess, if anything, would be Frigg, the queen of the Aesir gods. Keep in mind, this is just an educated guess, so I may be wrong. So all my Norse mythology experts, if I'm wrong on this, leave a comment down below. Now, as Esika, she's a good ramp commander, giving all your legendary creatures vigilance and tap for any mana. However, as the Prismatic Bridge, it's potentially the strongest enchantment in the set. Having the ability to net a free creature or planeswalker on your upkeep is extremely strong if it sticks around to your next turn. You'll mostly be building this deck around the bridge with all 5 colors, stuffing in all the legendary creatures you can with it. With a deck like that, I'd personally recommend adding Sisay, Weatherlight Captain, since she herself can tutor legendary permanents on and put them on the field herself. The next card we're going to be getting into is one of the cards that I personally liked the minute it came out. It's Sarulf, Realm Eater. And Sarulf is a 3/3 for 1 and Golgari, so 1 black and green, for a legendary wolf. Whenever a permanent an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Sarulf Realm Eater. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Sarulf has 1 or more +1/+1 counters on it, you may remove all of them. If you do, exile each other non-land permanent with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of counters removed this way. So Sarulf is based off Fenrir, the offspring of Loki that was deemed a threat to the Aesir gods, as he'd bring the end of the world, so they had him chained to the earth until Ragnarok. When I first saw the card design for Sarulf, I was a bit dismayed, since it should have had an important keyword to this text, Trample. Trample would have made Sarulf so much better in design. That said, his current design is not something to overlook. He's a potential board wipe on a body, plus his design, to my knowledge, would lend him to go for more than an unconventional Voltron build, probably with the Ikoria Ability Giver cards, with a heavy sub-theme of sacrifice and removal. I already have a list for Sarulf made when I saw him, so future Brewing with $50 episode spoiler right here. Our next commander is another one of the gods. It's Tergrid, god of Fright, with the modal Tergrid's Lantern. Tergrid is a 4/5 for 3 black legendary god with menace, and whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. And the Lantern is 3 and a black for a legendary artifact. With tap, target player loses 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. And 3 and a black to untap the Lantern. So my educated guess as to who Tergrid would be is Hel, the ruler of the underworld Helheim. I feel like Tergrid is a reimagined If That Betrays, where she can steal permanents going to the graveyard to your side of the field. The Lantern side is also pretty strong, having an opponent sacrifice a non-land permanent on tap and the ability to untap itself. Honestly, both sides of this card are scary enough to your opponents, especially in one of the strongest colors in Magic, where sacrificing creatures, reanimation, and tutors are some of the strong points in the color. Alright, so our next card up is Vorinclex, Monstrous Raider. It is a 6/6 for 4 green legendary Phyrexian Praetor, the first of its kind, and it has Trample and Haste, plus the abilities if you were to put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. If an opponent would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, they put half that many of each of those kinds of counters on the permanent or player instead, rounded down. This may be a controversial opinion, yet I stand by it. The design on Vorinclex is not amazing. Sure, it's a doubling season for yourself, plus it has haste and trample on it, but it doesn't really protect itself or make use of the doubling season ability on his body. If it had Infect or Wither of some kind, he would be 10 times better in my personal opinion. Not saying that he's a bad card at all, not at all. But I feel he'd be better suited in the 99 rather than your staple commander. I mean, if you disagree with me on my statement, please leave a comment down below. Our next card is another modal DFC card with Valki, God of Lies, that turns into Tibalt, Cosmic Impostor. So, Valki, God of Lies is a 2/1 for 1 and a black, legendary god. Whenever Valki enters the battlefield, each opponent reveals their hand. For each opponent, exile a creature card they reveal this way until Valki leaves the battlefield. And X, choose a creature card exiled with Valki with converted mana cost X. Valki becomes a copy of that card. And Tibalt, Cosmic Impostor, is 5 and black-red, so 5 in Rakdos for a 5 loyalty planeswalker. As Tibalt enters the battlefield, you get an emblem with you may play cards exiled with Tibalt, Cosmic Impostor, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. Its +2 is exile the top card of each player's library. Its -3 is exile target artifact or creature. And the ultimate ability, the -8, is exile all cards from all graveyards and add 3 red. Now, this is one of the few gods on this list you don't need to be a scholar to know who it is. It's Loki. It's Loki, the god of mischief, and with the greatest subversion of expectations, his modal is the strongest Tibalt planeswalker currently printed. His emblem on the enter the battlefield trigger does not go away, so even if you recast him, all the cards exiled with him are still playable with him on the field. As Valki, he's an extremely strong version of Lazav, since he enters the battlefield and everyone reveals their hand and you get to exile a creature and then make Valki a copy of it at a later time. Extremely versatile and a deck I'm curious as to how it's going to be built. Our next card is Koll, the Forgemaster. It's a 2/2 for Boros, so red and white for a legendary dwarf warrior. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, if it was enchanted or equipped, return it to its owner's hand. Creature tokens you control that are enchanted or equipped get +1/+1. If you've seen the Commander's Quarters episode on this card, you already know this card is an infinite combo enabler. As most people would go the infinite damage route with this card, Koll is also a really fun equipment commander if you want longer games and feels perfect with Wyleth Soul of Steel, in either card being the great in the 99 or the command zone. Our next card is Fynn the Fangbearer. It is a 1/3 for 1 and a green, legendary human warrior with Death Touch, and whenever a creature you control with Death Touch deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. It's basically Death Touch Tribal, a tribe I never thought I'd really see on a commander. You can also add Infect cards in this deck, although the amount of help green gets is not the best. I have Aronis the Indomitable Infect deck, and Mono Green Infect is a bit rough. That said, not only does Fynn help add some extra lethality, but paired with trample cards like Brawn, Death Touch Tribal gets a needed clock speed up. Our next card is another god with another modal DFC. It is Toralf, God of Fury, and his hammer. So Toralf is a 5/4 for 2 red, legendary god with trample. Whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, Toralf deals damage equal to the excess to any target other than the permanent. And the Toralf's hammer is a 1 and a red for a legendary equipment. Equipped creature has 1 and red. Tap it to unattach Toralf's hammer, deals 3 damage to any target, return Toralf's hammer to its owner's hand. An equipped creature gets +3/+0 as long as it's legendary, equipped 1 and a red. So, it's Thor, Odin's son, slayer of Jormungandr, and most notably, the god of thunder. This is probably my favorite commander released in Kaldheim, next to one more commander which we'll get to in a little bit. Both sides are extremely good, as Toralf dealing excess damage, especially in red, becomes worrisome for your opponents when they get shot for extra damage by your Star of Extinctions or Blasphemous Axe. As the hammer, it's really strong, allowing you to return it to your hand so that it can evade commander attacks and deal 3 damage to any target. Most commanders now are printed with smaller toughness, so hammering something for 3 and killing it is more possible. This is part of the cards, especially in their amazing showcase forms that I pre-ordered, all thanks to Face-to-Face Games. They're not a sponsor of the show, but they've been my go-to LGS for years now. Our next card is Koma, Cosmos Serpent. It is a 6/6 for 3 and green, blue, legendary Serpent that has this spell can't be countered. At the beginning of each upkeep, create a 3/3 blue Serpent creature token named Koma's Coil. Sacrifice another Serpent, choose 1, tap target permanent, its activated abilities cannot be activated this turn, or Koma Cosmic Serpent gains indestructible until end of turn. It's Jormungandr, the World Serpent and another of Loki's offspring who kept growing in size since birth to the point it engulfed the entire world. Koma is a commander that should not be overlooked at all, since not only is it uncounterable, but it also protects itself. This would make a pretty amazing sea monster tribal commander, since most to all of the creatures are in Simic colors, and it gives you access to utility cards like AC, Tyrant, Gyre Saints, Serpent of Yawning Depths, and Slimvoda, the Rising Deep. Even going token tribal with Koma is a very good strategy, especially getting some token doublers to get more Serpents and more ways to protect Koma. Our next card here is Vega the Watcher. It is a 2/2 for 1 and Azorius, so 1 white and blue for a legendary bird spirit that has flying, and whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, draw a card. I may not be the most sold on Vega, but I cannot deny that the ability is very versatile. Having access to a plethora of abilities like Aftermath, Suspend, Flashback, Jumpstart, and Adventure, you could easily draw a good chunk of your deck. Pair up with cards like Future Sight and Precognition Field, you get an extra advantage from not only seeing the top card, but casting it from either exile or from the top of your deck. The little owl can easily let you get to your combo pieces or your extra advantage. And now our next card is Jorn, God of Winter, and its modal Kaldring the Rimestaff. So Jorn, God of Winter, is a 3/3 for 2 and a green. Legendary snow creature god, I should say. Whenever Jorn attacks, untap each snow permanent you control. And Kaldring the Rimestaff is 1 and Demir, so 1 blue and black for a legendary snow artifact. With tap, you may play target snow permanent card from your graveyard this turn. If you do, it enters the battlefield tapped. So I'm not entirely sure who Jorn would be in relation to Norse mythology. Apart from that, after
some research on snow permanents and the abilities on both sides, I'd say Jorn is the better side since you get to untap every snow permanent you control, including your lands.
So you effectively get a Bear Umbra on a creature and you get a second turn to play all your big spells. The Rimestaff is okay at best since it limits you to just your snow permanents and a good majority of them are not game-changingly good. Great creature, just not an amazing artifact. Our next card is Varragoth, Bloodsky Sire. It is a 2/3 for 2 and a black legendary demon rogue with Death Touch and Boast for 1 and a black. Target player searches their library for a card, then shuffles their library and puts that card on top of it. This falls under the fun category of tutors on a body. With Sidisi, Undead Vizier, Razaka the Foul-Blooded, and Root-Scarred Demon, the advantage Varragoth has is that it's small enough that you can get it out and on at least turn 1 with a Dark Ritual and turn 2 swing and tutor for a card, at the expense of your opponent's only getting hit for 2 damage. I'd say this is maybe a Dark Horse competitive commander since the cost is super cheap and he can tutor extremely quickly if he hits your opponents. Our next card is Halvar, God of Battle, with its modal DFC being Sword of the Realms. So Halvar, God of Battle, is a 4/4 for 2 white legendary god. Creatures you control that are enchanted or equipped have double strike, and at the beginning of each combat, you may attach target aura or equipment attached to a creature you control to target creature you control. And the Sword of the Realms is 1 and a white for legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has vigilance. Whenever enchanted creature dies, return it to its owner's hand with equip 1 and a white. So Halvar is Heimdall, the Watchman of the Gods, Guardian of Asgard, and Protector of the Rainbow Bridge. I'm a big fan of the God side of this card, giving double strike to all your equipped creatures, and attaching an aura or equipment to a creature at the beginning of combat. It screams to be in a white Equipments Matter or Voltron build. I find the Sword's Death ability great, but Vigilance is way too common of a keyword in white. I think giving the creature First Strike or Wither would be really cool and would change up the game a smidge. Our next card is Alrund, God of the Cosmos, with its modal DFC, Hakka Whispering Raven. So, Alrund is a 1/1 for 3 blue legendary god. Alrund gets +1/+1 for each card in your hand and each foretell card you own in exile. And at the beginning of your end step, choose a card type, then reveal the top 2 cards of your library, put all cards of the chosen type into your hand and the rest of the bottom of your library in any order. And Hakka is 1 and a blue for a 2/3 legendary bird. Flying, whenever Hakka Whispering Raven deals combat damage to a player, return it to its owner's hand, then scry 2. This is Odin, the Allfather, ruler of the Aesir gods and god of wisdom and magic. And man, did they botch this card. I would have expected something more grandiose for the ruler of the Aesir gods than just +1/+1 for each card in your hand and foretell you own on the exile. And as laughy-assy as it would have
laughy ass.
as it is to have Stormcrow 2.0 on his other side, I don't find Alrund playable at all. This is one of the only design flaws I really saw in the set. Our next card is Maya, Bredagard Protector. It is a 2/3 for 2 green, white, legendary human warrior. With other creatures you control, get +1/+1, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you create a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. I actually really like this design, since there has not been any real focus on Selesnya land matters. It's a breath of fresh air, since now you can reliably ramp and draw with white, and exile and wipe with green. And with all the token strategies in these colors, it won't be hard to fill up the 100 card list with amazing interactions with populate cards and landfall. Our next card is Fynn, Judge of Valor. It is a 2/4 for 2 white, black. Legendary Angel Cleric with flying and lifelink. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest in your graveyard. To be quite honest, I don't really have a major opinion on this card. I find it overcosted to start, and their build really odd. It's basically Orzhov's Surveil on the second spell cast, and although it's in Reanimator and Recursion colors, it's a very abnormal build. I've seen Angel Tribal as its main theme, but I don't think it takes advantage of the main ability, and I'm at a loss for how to build it. So, if you have any suggestions on how to build Fynn, please let me know in the comments down below. Our next card is Agar, the Freezing Flame. It is a 3/3 for 1 and is it, so 1 blue and red for a legendary giant wizard, and it has whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess damage. If it's a giant wizard or spell you control dealt damage to it this turn, draw a card. My thoughts are that Agar is Aegir, the Jotun of the Sea. I doubt that is the association, so if you know who it is, comment down below. As it pertains to the card itself, he's a pretty cool giant commander, and he gives you card draw for damage. Admittedly, there are better commanders who do the draw for damage better than Agar, notably Niv Mizzet, yet having the ability to do excess damage from spells and giants and wizard creatures netting you cards is pretty fun, pretty good, admittedly. Alright, so our next card is Cosima, God of the Voyage, and her modal DFC, the Amonkhet. So, Cosima is a 2/4 for 2 and a blue, legendary god. It has, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may exile Cosima. If you do, it gains whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control. If Cosima is exiled, you may put a voyage counter on it. If you don't, return Cosima to the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, and draw X cards where X is the number of voyage counters on it. And the Amonkhet is 1 and blue for 3/3 legendary vehicle that has whenever a vehicle you control deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles that many cards from the top of their library. You may play lands from among those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and crew for 1. This is a very strange card to try to build around. Its blue land matters, which is not seen very much except for maybe Moonfolk Tribal, with Cosima getting a boost off voyage counters and the ability to let you draw off those counters. The Amonkhet is the side with the most value in my opinion, since you're exiling cards from your opponent's libraries based on a vehicle's power, and you get to steal valuable land drops from your opponents. As far as the Norse mythos goes, I'm not sure who that may be, but Cosima seems to be a fun commander to try to work around. Our next card is Narfi, Betrayer King. Narfi is a 4/3 for 3 and Dimir, so 3 blue and black for a legendary snow zombie wizard that has other snow and zombie creatures you control get +1/+1, and 3 snow permanents, so one snow, 2 snow, 3 snow. Return Narfi, Betrayer King from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So the Commander's Quarters has already done 2 videos on Narfi, so I won't go into too much detail about him. I find Narfi to be limited in his actual use, but apparently you can create an infinite mana loop with him, so I'm not going to really touch what Mitch and his viewers came up with. Our next card is Moridi of the Frost. It is a 0/0 for 2 green, blue, legendary snow shapeshifter with Changeling, and you may have Morite of the Frost enter the battlefield as a copy of a permanent you control, except it's legendary and snow in addition to its other types, and if it was a creature, it enters with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it and has Changeling. So, Morite is a fun clone commander for Simic. His ability is limited to only creatures you control, however you can still copy a plethora of amazing permanents in both green and blue. I will be using him in my Rolex Clone Man deck since he works perfectly in that deck. Our next card is Kardur Doomscourge. He is a 4/3 for 2 and Rakdos, so 2 black and red, legendary demon berserker. When Kardur Doomscourge enters the battlefield, until your next turn, creatures your opponents control attack each combat if able, and attacks a player other than you if able. And whenever an attacking creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. I think Kaldring is supposed to be Surtur, the fire giant that led his kin to the battle against the Aesir and Vanir gods during the destruction of the cosmos, also known as Ragnarok. As a commander, Kaldring is pretty funny, goading all your opponent's creatures for a rotation on enter the battlefield. His second ability is also pretty worthwhile as long as you have instant speed removal. Overall, Kaldring would be a fun challenge to build around, so who knows, maybe he'll show up in a Brewing for $50 video. Our next card is Sigrid, God Favored. Sigrid is a 2/2 for 1 white legendary human warrior with flash, first strike, protection from god creatures, and whenever Sigrid, God Favored, enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 target attacking or blocking creature until Sigrid leaves the battlefield. Sigrid seems like a fun prison commander style deck since you get to exile creatures until that permanent leaves the battlefield. Namely, Hixus was the original best, then it came Sigrid, having the ability to flash and exile attacking or defending creature is pretty nuts, especially with a creature that also comes equipped with First Strike. I really like this card, and I'll maybe do a deck around him. Who knows? We'll see in the future. Our next card is Kaldheim, God of Kinship, and the modal DFC, the Ringheart Crest. And Kaldheim is a 2/4 for 2 green legendary god. As long as you control 3 or more legendary creatures, Kaldheim gets +4/+2 and has Vigilance, and has 1 in green tapped. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a legendary creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. And the Ringheart Crest is 1 and a green for a legendary artifact. As the Ringheart Crest enters the battlefield, choose a creature type and tap to add 1 green and you can only spend this mana only to cast a creature spell of the chosen type or a legendary creature spell. I believe this is supposed to be Freya, the goddess of fertility, love, and sex. As it stands with her card, I don't like her design at all as a commander. She's extremely limited to just legendary creatures for both her abilities, and the crest is also just 1 extra green mana for just legendary and tribal creatures. It's another design flaw that I can't get behind. Her and Alrund are both the weakest designs in the set. Our next card is Orvar, the All Form. It is a 3/3 for 3 and a blue legendary shapeshifter with Changeling. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, if it targets 1 or more permanents you control, create a token that's a copy of 1 of those permanents. When a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard this card, create a token that's a copy of target permanent. So Orvar is pretty busted. You get to copy permanents when you get targeted by your spells, and the ability to make a copy of a permanent when he gets discarded. It's a scary card to deal with. If you play mass target spells for your creatures like Ghostly Flicker or Hidden Strings, you make copies of whatever creature you target and get their ETBs, if they have any. I imagine seeing this card in casual competitive metas, not as necessarily CDH, but like mid-tier level decks. Our next card is Radan, God of the Worthy, with the modal DLC Valkyria, Protector's Shield. Radan is a 2/3 for 2 and a white legendary god with flying and vigilance. Snowlands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped, and non-creature spells your opponents cast with converted mana cost 4 or greater cost 2 more to cast. And Valkyria, Protector Shield, is 3 and a white for a legendary artifact. If a source an opponent controls would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, prevent 1 of that damage. And whenever you or another permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter that spell or ability unless its controller pays 1. I feel like both sides of Radan are very powerful in their own rights, but the shield is probably what everyone would choose for utility purposes. It counters spells if opponents don't have enough to pay for it, and it prevents damage, so a full swing that could be lethal would actually bring you to low single digits. Radan herself as a 2/3 with flying and vigilance is alright, but what I like a lot from her creature side is the non-creature spell tax, and a possible contender to put in my Hokori Dust Drinker deck. Alright, so our next card is Birgi, God of Storytelling, and her modal DLC, Harnfell, Horn of Bounty. So Birgi is a 3/3 for 2 and a red legendary god that has whenever you cast a spell, add a red mana. Until end of turn, you do not lose this mana as steps and phases end. And creatures you control can boast twice during each of your turns rather than once. And the horn is 4 and a red for a legendary artifact that has discard a card, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. This is my second favorite commander printed in the set. It's really broken on both sides. On one half, Bergi gives you extra mana for each card you cast spells. And on the Horn side, you can discard cards to exile 2 at a time and give you more cards to work with. I absolutely love this card, and I can easily see this as a red staple card in red for the future. Alright, we're down to our last 5 commanders. And we're going to start this list off with Inga Runeyes. So Inga is a 3/3 for 3 and a blue, legendary human wizard. When Inga Runeyes enters the battlefield, scry 3, and when Inga Runeyes dies, draw 3 cards if 3 or more creatures died this turn. I don't have much to say on this card other than I very highly doubt this is a viable commander to build around. I see this more as being in the 99 rather than being in the command zone. Our next card is Svella, Ice Shaper. Svella is a 2/4 for 1 and Gruul. So 1 red and green. Legendary Snow Troll Warrior. For 3 and tap, create a colorless snow artifact token named Icy Manalith. With tap, add 1 mana of any color. And 6 red green. To tap, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may cast a spell from among them without paying its mana cost. Put the rest at the bottom of your library in a random order. This is another card I absolutely love. He makes mana by himself, and his second ability pays for itself after a while. Having the ability to produce mana rocks on a creature is insane value and gets you significant advantage over your opponents in the long run. Our next card is Arni Brokenbrow. It's a 3/3 with 2 and a red legendary human berserker that has haste and boast. For 1, you may change Arni Brokenbrow's base power to 1 plus the greatest power among other creatures you control until end of turn. So admittedly, I'm not the biggest fan of Boast. Apart from Varragoth, it's not a really great ability. Arni's ability seems limited, especially if you don't have any creatures with greater power than him on the field. By the time he attacks, I don't know, Arni just doesn't seem like a great commander to me. Our second to last card on the list is Harald, King of Skemfar. So Harald is a 3/2 for 1 and Golgari. So 1 black and green for a legendary elf warrior with menace. And when Harald, King of Skemfar, enters the battlefield, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal an elf warrior Tyvar card from among them and put them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Honestly, it's better in the 99 than a standalone commander. His ability doesn't feel important enough to make him a good commander to play. And our last card is Egon, God of Death, and his modal DFC, the Throne of Death. So Egon is a 6/6 for 2 and a black with legendary God with Death Touch. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile 2 cards from your graveyard. If you can't, sacrifice Egon and draw a card. And the Throne of Death is a 1 black for a legendary artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, mill a card, and 2 and a black to tap. Exile a creature card from your graveyard to draw a card. We saved probably the worst god for last. Admittedly, I couldn't decide between him and Tergrid, who was hell, but Tergrid fits the bill a little bit more. His ability on the creature just sucks, honestly, and the throne is better in the 99 in a self-mill deck. Other than that, him and his throne are a major pass. And that was all 33 commanders from Kaldheim. I know it's a bit of a longer video, but if you stuck it out this far, I do very much appreciate you, your patience, and your tolerance to hear me out for this long. Now, if you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. And don't be scared to hit that bell icon to be notified of every single video that comes out of the channel. I post weekly on Fridays, whether it be these kind of mini podcast videos, gameplay videos, or even deck tech videos. And you get one every Friday. We also have our social medias linked down below in the description, so go give them a follow as well. And that's it for me today. Enjoy Kaldheim, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.